The road that led her here had almost disappeared. What once might have been a paved driveway was now a fractured strip of gray stone, half swallowed by weeds and the relentless march of time. Each step crunched beneath her boots, the sound sharp against the silence that pressed down like a heavy hand. The forest around her was alive with the low whisper of leaves, a soft, constant breath that seemed to carry voices just out of reach. She stopped for a moment, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, and looked up. The house loomed ahead, waiting. It didn't feel like a house that welcomed people. It sat crouched at the end of the overgrown drive like some ancient beast watching her approach. Its walls, once proud stone, were darkened with moss and rain stains, every crack filled with the green fingers of ivy. The roof sagged slightly, but its curved wings, two great, rounded structures, rose on either side, like the ears of some grotesque animal. In the center, the sloped roof bore two small dormer windows, their glass catching faint daylight but reflecting nothing back, as if they were eyes too tired to shine. Her throat tightened. She had seen the house before, in a photograph hidden at the bottom of her mother's old trunk. Back then it was vibrant, almost alive, the kind of house that demanded to be remembered. Her mother never spoke of it, never explained why the photo was locked away, but now here it was, solid, real, and breathing the same damp air she did. The woman adjusted the rolled sleeves of her light brown shirt and stepped forward. Gravel crunched, then silence. She became aware of how her heart was pounding, its rhythm too fast, too loud, as though the house might hear it. The forest thickened around the clearing. Tall oaks and pines arched overhead, their branches knitted together to dim the sun. Shafts of pale light pierced through the canopy, catching dust and pollen in slow-moving columns. Every now and then, a bird called, sharp and sudden, only to fall silent again as though warned into quiet. She drew in a breath, expecting the scent of fresh pine, but what filled her lungs was older, heavier, damp stone, mildew, and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. The closer she moved, the more details revealed themselves. The balconies jutting from each wing were framed by wooden railings, but the wood was blackened, eaten through by rot. The glass doors behind them stood closed, but the grime streaking them made it impossible to see inside. Ivy clung to the walls with desperate fingers, twisting up toward the windows, choking them slowly. And then, the strangest thing, the chimney. It was thin, weathered, almost fragile compared to the hulking mass of stone below, but faint tendrils of smoke curled from its mouth. Her breath caught. Someone was here. The thought made her skin prickle. She had expected abandonment, dust, silence, the kind of emptiness that could be entered and owned by memory. But smoke meant life. Smoke meant fire. And fire meant someone inside. Her hand trembled at her side, and she forced it into a fist. She reminded herself why she had come. Because questions had haunted her since childhood, because her mother's silence had never been enough, because dreams of this place had followed her for years. She had promised herself that one day she would stand before it, and now she did. But standing was different from entering. She paused again, staring at the warped front door tucked beneath the central roof. It was wooden, heavy, studded with rusted iron nails. Shadows pooled around its frame as if reluctant to leave. The windows on either side were so black they seemed painted. She imagined what it might feel like to cross the threshold, the air colder, the smell sharper, the weight of years pressing down. She imagined footsteps echoing in empty halls, the creak of boards shifting under her weight, the possibility of someone, or something, watching from the dark corners. The wind shifted suddenly, brushing past her ears like a whisper. She spun around, but the forest stretched behind her, still and endless. The driveway vanished into shadow, swallowed by trees. No way back, she thought. Not now. She looked again at the house, at its bowed stone and silent windows, and tried to convince herself it was just a building. Just stone and wood, brick and glass. Nothing more. But deep inside, she knew better. She lingered at the edge of the clearing longer than she realized. The house seemed to grow while she stood still, its presence swelling to fill the space, until even the forest behind her felt like nothing but a backdrop to its silent performance. Her boots scraped against stone as she took another step forward. This one sounded louder than the rest, as though the ground had amplified her presence. She froze, every muscle locked. And then she heard it. A faint creak, so soft she thought at first it was her imagination. It came again. slow, dragging, like wood shifting under weight. The sound carried from within the house. Her skin crawled. Forcing herself to move, she edged closer to the front steps. They were made of wide slabs of stone, cracked down the middle and lined with weeds that pushed through like veins. Each step she mounted felt like a decision carved into the air, irreversible. When she reached the porch, the smell hit her more strongly, damp wrought and iron. The wooden boards groaned beneath her weight, long unused but not entirely abandoned. She ran her fingers lightly across the porch railing. The wood splintered under her touch, soft and brittle as if it had been dead for years. But the smoke was fresh. She glanced upward, following the curl of gray into the canopy. The thought of warmth and fire should have been comforting, but instead it made her stomach knot. Fires needed tending. Fires needed people, and if there was someone here, who were they? Why had they chosen to live in a place like this? Her eyes flicked to the door again. Its iron studs were flecked with reddish brown, and for an awful moment, she imagined it was not rust but dried blood. She blinked hard, pushing the thought away, but the image lingered like an aftertaste. She stepped closer until she was standing directly before it. The wood rose above her like a barrier, and she felt smaller in its shadow. The handle was iron too, twisted into a shape that might once have been elegant, now corroded and rough. She lifted her hand. Her fingers hovered just above the handle when a shiver of air brushed her cheek. Not wind. Something warmer, as if the door itself had exhaled. She jerked her hand back. Her heartbeat thundered. Every instinct screamed to turn away, to retreat down the broken path and vanish into the trees before the house decided she belonged to it. But then she remembered the photograph, remembered her mother's silence, remembered the nights she had dreamed of windows like eyes watching her sleep. She clenched her jaw. She hadn't come all this way to leave. A low groan echoed from deep inside the house, so faint it could have been the shifting of beams, or a sigh. She swallowed hard, forcing her trembling hand back toward the handle. Her fingers brushed the iron, and a shock ran through her like static. The metal was too warm, impossibly warm for something abandoned. She snatched her hand back again, staring at her tingling fingertips. The door remained still, its surface unyielding, but she could no longer pretend it was just wood. She stepped back, breathing hard. From here she could see more details of the facade. The windows were not simply black with grime. They seemed to ripple faintly, as though a film of liquid coated the inside of the glass. When the sunlight struck at the right angle, she thought she saw something stir behind them. A shape, a shadow, gone in an instant. Her scalp prickled, and she resisted the urge to run. Instead, she turned her gaze to the balconies above. The railings sagged, but in one corner, a scrap of fabric fluttered. It was pale, almost white, caught on a splinter. She squinted, and her breath caught again. It wasn't fabric. It was lace. She knew that lace. She had seen it before, in a faded photograph of her mother at 19, standing in a dress stitched with the same delicate patterns. Her chest tightened. The wind shifted, carrying the lace fragment in a tiny flutter, and in that movement she almost heard laughter. Soft, distant, a woman's voice she hadn't heard in years. Her throat closed. The house wasn't only holding secrets. It was holding her mother. Not alive, she told herself. That wasn't possible. But traces, echoes, shadows of what had once been. And if the house had kept that, what else had it kept? Her legs felt heavy, but she forced herself to step back to the center of the porch. From here, she could see everything at once. The crooked rooflines, the closed balconies, the lace caught like a memory refusing to die. The forest pressed close around the clearing, its silence a shield that only made the house louder. She felt as though she stood in a theater where the stage was set and the actor had yet to appear, but the script already knew her name. Her hands trembled, but she steadied them at her sides. The house waited, and for the first time, she wondered if it had been waiting not for anyone, but for her. Her breath came shallow, uneven, each exhale misting faintly in the cool air. The sky above had dimmed, though no clouds had gathered. The forest canopy thickened, and with it, the light seemed to retreat. She rubbed her arms, though the chill felt less like weather and more like a presence seeping from the stone walls themselves. The lace on the balcony stirred again, fluttering as though in silent beckoning. She turned her eyes back to the chimney. The smoke was steady now, curling upward in gray ribbons that clung stubbornly to the roof before breaking apart into the treetops. The fire inside was no accident. It was tended, deliberate. Whoever lived here was not hiding, they were waiting. Her throat went dry. She lowered herself slowly, crouching at the porch edge to run her hand over the cracked stone steps. Cold, damp moss clung to her fingertips. It smeared green across her skin like paint, and she stared at it too long, transfixed by how the color darkened to brown against her palm, almost the shade of dried blood. She wiped her hand furiously against her jeans, but the stain lingered faintly, as though it had sunk beneath her skin. She rose again, every instinct thrumming with the need to retreat. And yet her body betrayed her, carrying her closer to the door. The iron handle gleamed faintly in the waning light. She had expected it to remain dull with rust, but the more she stared, the more it shone, as if polished by unseen hands. Her reflection swam faintly in its curve, her eyes wide, her face pale, her hair loose where it had slipped free from its bun. But the reflection was wrong. Her reflection blinked before she did. Her chest seized. She staggered back, nearly tripping on the porch boards, her boot heel catching in a splintered crack. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle the gasp threatening to escape. The handle remained still, gleaming innocently in the half-light. She shook her head, whispering to herself, "It's the nerves. Just the nerves. You're seeing things because you're afraid." But some part of her, the same part that had drawn her here despite every warning, knew it wasn't nerves. This house didn't just exist in silence. It listened. It watched. She forced her gaze away, searching for distraction, for proof of something solid and real. That was when she noticed the carvings. Along the doorframe, hidden beneath vines and flaking paint, were markings cut into the wood. She leaned closer, pushing ivy aside. Symbols emerged. Circles within circles, jagged lines crossing through them, shapes that seemed to writhe when stared at too long. The grooves were deep, not the casual scratches of vandals, but etched with purpose, with violence. She traced one with her finger. It felt sharp, fresh despite its age. The wood beneath her touch seemed to pulse faintly, as though the carving itself carried a heartbeat. She yanked her hand back, wiping it against her shirt, her skin tingling with the same static that had shocked her when she touched the handle. The house was marked, bound, perhaps, or warned. She stepped back, scanning the walls, the balconies, the windows. The carvings weren't only at the door. They circled the house, faint but visible, weaving a pattern too vast to ignore. The entire building was caged in symbols. But cages were built for dangerous things. Her stomach turned cold. Was the house protected from the world outside, or was the world being protected from what lay within? A sudden sound shattered the silence. Thud. It came from inside, heavy and deliberate, as though something vast had shifted across the floor. Her breath froze in her throat. She stood rigid, ears straining. Silence returned, thicker now, heavier, pressing against her chest. Then came another sound, softer, closer. A whisper, low and almost tender, curling through the crack of the door. She couldn't make out the words, but her name seemed to surface within them, stretched thin, almost a sigh. Her knees weakened. Her name. She staggered back, heart hammering. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. No one knew she was here, no one alive at least. Yet the house had spoken as if it had been expecting her. Tears pricked her eyes, born of fear and the sharp ache of recognition. She had heard that voice before. Not recently, not clearly, but once, long ago, when she was a child clinging to the edge of sleep and her mother whispered promises in the dark. Her mouth went dry. The house wasn't merely haunted. It was personal. She wrapped her arms around herself, fighting to breathe evenly. Her boots felt anchored to the boards, her body unwilling to obey the primal urge to flee. For every step her mind screamed to take backward, something deeper urged her forward. The symbols, the lace, the smoke, the whisper of her name, everything tied her to this place in a way that was undeniable. She shut her eyes tightly. Images rose in the dark. Her mother's face, young and smiling in that photograph, the lace dress, the same trees looming in the background. And behind her mother, half hidden by shadow, the outline of the house. Always the house. Her mother had never spoken of it, never explained. But silence was not protection, it was invitation. Her eyes snapped open. The house stood before her, unchanged, unblinking. She stepped forward again, until she was close enough to touch the door. The carvings seemed to pulse faintly, alive in the gathering dusk. Her fingers trembled at her side. She didn't reach for the handle this time. Not yet. Instead, she whispered into the silence, her voice raw and unsteady. "I'm here." The words vanished into the wood, swallowed whole. For a heartbeat, nothing answered. And then, from deep within, something moved. Slow, deliberate footsteps crossed the floor, coming closer, closer, until they stopped just beyond the door. The iron handle shifted, once, twice, and then stilled. Her breath broke in a ragged gasp. The forest pressed in around her, the air thick with expectation. The house was awake now, awake, listening, and aware. And it was no longer waiting. It had found her.